In this video I'm going to demonstrate how to use the Cosmic Photoshop action. So in this video tutorial I'm going to be using this photo here, and the way the action works is that we start off by brushing over our photo where we want to apply the effect. We then choose a direction, left, right, up, down, or middle, and we play the action and it will create like these cosmic clouds. So you can see in this example I chose the left direction. We can change the colours, we can move all the stars around. There's a whole bunch of different things we can do, which I'll tell you all about. So I've got a few more examples here. This photo, chose the right direction, changed the colours. This guy, got that. Horse. Now that there is the middle direction. So that really just grows out in all directions. This one, again, that's the middle direction. There's another right. And this one here is an example of the up direction. So you can see how it all grows up into the air and it tapers off nicely with a little bit of black mist and the stars. Okay, so I am going to close these down and get started. So I have my photo here. There's a few important things we need to check before you run the action. So look into your layer panel here and make sure that your photo is set as a background, so it should look like this. So for example, if you start up Photoshop, open up your photo and it doesn't say background with the lock symbol, you can't just rename it background like this. Background, and then you can't just do that and lock it. What you need to do is go to Layer, New, Background from Layer, and you can see it sets it properly as the background. So that's an important step. Otherwise the action won't work, basically. So still in the Layer panel, head up to the top right hand corner here, go to Panel Options. Down the bottom, make sure Add Copy to Copy Glazing Groups is selected. Next, go to Image, Mode, and just make sure RGB color mode and 8 bits a channel is selected. And that is it. And just make sure that you're using a good size photo. You can see for this example here, mine's 2100 by 2500, 300 dpi. And a little tip, if you want to, say if you want to run this, you want to create more effects out to the left, you need a bit more room, you can go to Image, Canvas Size, and I'm just going to switch this to pixels, and because I want to add a bit more room to the left, I'm just going to push that over there, so we're creating room at this side. Let's go like 1000 pixels, and the color, I'll just color pick close to the edge here, and click OK. So you can see that now when we run the action that we have all this room here, but for this example we'll just keep it here. Alright, so what we need to do now is create a new layer, so go Layer, New Layer. This needs to be called Brush and it must be all lowercase, otherwise the action won't work. So if you get an error saying something about a set error, that's because you haven't created your brush layer. So click OK. So with this brush layer selected, hit B on the keyboard, get a brush out, choose any color. I recommend just using a soft brush. And so start brushing over your photo where you want to start growing the effects out from. So let's go a bit over here, down along here, up along here, and just a bit on our arm here. Okay, so that's pretty much all you need to do. So what we're going to do now is load up the actions. Just go to the window menu, go to Actions, the Actions panel will pop up, go to this top icon, go to Load Actions and select the Cosmic.atm. It will pop up here. We have our directions, so it's all ready to go. So the action runs for probably between 3 to 4 minutes. So just click play and then head on back to Photoshop in a few minutes time and you'll have the result. So I'm just going to skip the video ahead to get to the result of this one, and I'm just going to go through all the layers and talk about what they do and some customization techniques, okay? So the action stopped and you can see that this is the default result. they are the default colors that you get, and an important thing to know about this action is that every time you run it, the cloud formation is going to look completely different. The stars are going to be all be randomized, so you can run the action multiple times and see which one you like the best. Alright, so I'm going to minimize the actions panel, and the first thing we want to do, if we're looking into the layer panel here, it's all the folders are open, so we want to quickly collapse all those. So with the folder that's selected, Cosmic, hold down Control Alt, Command Option on the Mac, and just click on that arrow, and you can see that it just collapses all the folders. Okay, so up the top here, I've just left the brush layer on, so you can see that all the stars and everything emits from that area that we brush. And if you want to run the action again, all you need to do is shift select these three, delete, and run it again. But what I recommend you do is like save out this Photoshop file just for reference, and then run the action again and compare the two, see which one you like better. But we can make a lot of changes to these clouds anyway, which I'm going to show you about. So in the adjustments folder, this is where we make a lot of color changes and contrast changes to the overall look. We'll come back to that. We'll jump straight into the Cosmic folder first. So jump inside here. The top folder we have here is the stars. If I turn that on and off, you can see that that's all the stars. And you'll notice that all these folders have got masks on them, so you can really control where elements appear and where you don't want them to appear. So the way the masks work is if you just select those white boxes, if you hit B to get your brush out, use the square brackets here to adjust the brush size. And if you brush black, you can hide the stars like that. And so if I just brush black here, they're gone. If I brush white, I can bring them back. So you can control specifically where you want those stars to appear. But going inside, we have a few different layers here. These are just all the stars in separate layers, so you can move them around if you want. You can duplicate them, just hit Ctrl J to make a quick copy of it. And that's just the same with all these. Nothing much to those, so just play around with them. Now the photo edge highlights, if I just flick this folder on and off, you see that's not doing too much, but there are two layers in here that are turned off by default. If I switch these on, what it will do, it will outline the edges of where you brushed with this glowing line. But what you can do with these is what I like to do is firstly see if you like them or not. But I like to use the mask here and just brush away from a black brush. I just brush away the edges that I don't want, or details that I don't want. So like there. So you can play around with that. It's going to look completely different on each photo. So the top one here is the glow, so that's what's giving it the width. This one here is that thin line you can see. If I duplicate that, you see a bit more. This one here is good just to help define the edges of your photos. So if I bring this to 0, then 100, you can see that really helps define the details that might be lost with this cloud. So you can just hover over the opacity here, click and drag to the right, and you can increase that. But just remember, by default, that's the one that's left on. Alright, so moving on down, we have the photo color bleed. So what this layer does in here, this is, I'll just flick this blend mode to normal for a sec. I'll move it out the side. So this is basically a duplicate of the area that we brushed. It's extracted the colors from our photo and it's blurring them all out to the left, and the blend mode is set to add, so it sort of stacks on top of everything. And if I turn that on and off, you can see that it adds a lot of color into it. So if you look up through her hair, you can see that yellow band is emitting color through here, and what's helping the color is this layer above, change bleed color. So if I double click on that, you'll see that saturation. If I bring it back to a normal amount, you can't really see it, but the higher I increase that, the more color comes through. And what you can also do is play around with this hue slider, and you can actually change the color of the of what emits from our subject. So sometimes, it actually looks better to play around with those. But I'll just leave it on the default for a moment because we'll switch all these colors up to to more reds and yellows to go with the clothes and stuff. So I'm just going to reduce this a bit. So keep that one in mind. You can also, if I zoom out here, hit Control T to scale it. You can also experiment with like scaling this out, or even what do you do? Change the opacity. Just go down through the layers here. Try vivid light and just play around with the opacity of that. And also, if it's too bright, if you run the action and you think it's too blown out in areas, just select the photocarbon layer and just lower the opacity of that layer there. Or you could just brush in the mask to reduce the brightness that way. Alright, so this folder here is the cosmic clouds. So if I turn it off, you can see that that's basically all our clouds there. So you can see there's quite a neat little effect even if you turn it off. You know, there's still a little bit of cloud here from our black mist down the bottom here. But we'll keep this on. We'll jump inside and talk about all these layers here. Okay, so this top one, cosmic clouds brightness. If I double click on this, I can play around with these handles here and I can just adjust the brightness of it like that, so I can make it way darker. Or what you could do, if you wanted one particular area to be dark, you know, you could crush down this, take a look at what area looks good. So maybe like down through here it looks good dark. Then I could use the mask, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to flip this mask to completely hide it like that. So I've just hit Control I to invert it. So now nothing's visible because I've hidden it all through the mask. But if I grab my white brush now, I can now brush on where I want those dark areas to appear. See, like that, and up through there. So there is a lot of control with this action through these masks. So just remember that. Okay, so this one here, add color tint. If you double click on this, you can apply an overall color to the clouds. So you can see that this is my color here, orange, and if I start off at 0, well, it's no influence, but if I increase that to the right, you see it starts to fill it all orange, like that, which looks pretty cool. So, but what you can also do is either select a new color through this here, or what I like to do is just quickly scroll through these. You know, you get a feel for what really works with your photo, just like that. The purple looked pretty cool, but I actually think this looked quite nice. Might actually keep this on at about that amount. So that's a good one to play around with. This one here, brush color onto this layer. You can actually control all the color just by brushing colors onto this layer. So if I just grab, for example, a blue, like this, and I brush onto that layer, yeah, if I brush it, oh, actually, I know what's influencing that. So if I just turn that on off for a second, and I brush again, you can see that I can color the clouds whatever color I brush into that layer. So I can go like a gold, and you can see you can just brush in little dots. You can color that however you want. And what you could do then is if what I might do, I might just quickly clean up the area around her face. So I don't want those stars to appear over her face, so I'm just going to go into the mask. I'm going to grab my black brush and just brush that away. Clean that up. So going back down here, yeah, brush colors on, and what I like to do also, if you hit Control U to bring up the hue and saturation slider, you can play around quickly with those colors. So you can quickly flip these around and check out different combinations of colors. So you can see just even with that layer alone, you can have a lot of control over the color. But the reason why the color wasn't appearing blue before, because this layer here was adding a lot of orange. So fill around with these two layers because you can come up with some pretty cool combinations of colors. Alright, so increase this layer down, increase cloud definition. What you want to do with this layer, you just adjust the opacity. So if I just button this up to 100, well, there's 0, 100. Fortunately, this example hasn't generated the best example of this, but what it will do, like if I run the action again, this area might be a lot more dense with clouds, and if you adjust the opacity of this one, it actually brings up the definition of those clouds a lot more. So you just want to play around with that opacity to adjust how those clouds appear. Soft mist, this is a very subtle layer, just adds a tiny little bit of white mist. Opacity is only to 40, if I turn it to 100 you can see a bit more. Might keep it up a little bit higher, just like that. Okay, now these ones here, these 6 layers, these are the original colours that are generated. So if I just turn off this, these are the colours that create the default look. So you could just, double click on these boxes and change the colour. So we can change this to, I might just keep it there. You can change any one of those to build any combination of colour, and you can, what we did before, play around with these to adjust it further. So heaps of control in here. This is where you want to spend most of the time, playing around with the colours. Make sure it suits your photo nicely. So that's those. That's the Cosmic Clouds folder, and again has a mask. If you don't want it to appear somewhere, brush it away. Actually, one thing to note about this mask, if you double click on it, you have this density control. So if I bring this to 0, you can see that that's another way of increasing the density. Just by default I've made it a bit less dense, so it's not as thick, so you can either turn it all the way up to really reduce it, or bring it to 0 to really increase the prominence of those clouds. Play around with that one, that's a good one to mess around with. Overall glow, if I just flick this one on and off, this glow sort of emits around from the edges of all those clouds, and you can see by default it's a purple. If you go inside, you can see that there's our glow layer there, and what you can do, you can just double click on this layer here and play around this slider, and we can change the glow colour. So I'm just going to go with something that suits something like that. I might just use this mask to brush away. Actually, no, I won't. Actually, looks pretty good there. You can change the opacity, the blending mode of this. It's by default set to lighten. You can try different ones. Adds a lot brighter, but lighten I think works the best. Okay, that's a pretty simple layer. Black mist. You can see if I just flick that one on and off, it just helps with a bit of depth throughout the clouds, and it helps taper off the clouds around the edges. And if I extended the canvas, this Photoshop canvas way out to the left, it would extend the furthest off to the left. Alright, photo motion waves, I'm just going to flick all these off so you can see this one. So what that is, it just helps helps connect your photo, the area that we brushed, to all the clouds around it. So if I turn that off, you can see that it doesn't, that might be an effect that you prefer, but with these ones on, it helps it all bleed and blend together. Alright, this one here, vignette, just by default I've added this layer. It just darkens all the edges, but it's underneath everything, so it's not going to darken all your clouds. So if I brought this to the top, you see what it's done to the edges. So that just sits at the bottom. Okay, so I'm just going to jump back into the adjustments folder. We're going to talk about what we can do in here. Overall color tint, this is the same as the other layer before, but you can add more of an influence to your original photo as well. So again, we can apply this filter. Don't actually mind that, but I'll just add a little bit. Add sharpening, just by default I've just added a little bit of overall sharpening to the design. By default it's at 70%. You can turn that right up if you want to add a lot of sharpening. You can duplicate the layer to make it even more intense, but if you don't want it, just turn it off. Overall brightness, you can double click on this layer and play around with this handle here, where you can change the overall brightness of our design. Overall saturation, you can double click on this one, increase that saturation handle, so I can bring that up a little bit to make the colours pop a lot more. Use a single colour. If I flick this one on, it will fill our entire design with the one colour. So you can go black and white, just dragging it to that corner there. These ones here are the ones that you want to mess around with. A lot of fun. So what you do with these is just flick on the eye for that layer, and it will add a colour combination over your entire design. So what I like to do is I'm flicking down, I will just just randomly call a folder something just to mark it so I know which one it was. Done on that one. So then I'll flick between these two. I don't mind this one, but I don't want it at 100% opacity, so I could just decrease the opacity of that folder, just like that. I could even turn this one on to blend them together, but not use 100% of that one. I'll just lower this thing down a little bit. Maybe not. Just leave it. So yeah, play around with those and try mixing colours together. Okay. Now that's the bulk of everything. I've got a few more things here to go through. What I also like to do is brush on additional glows. So up the top here, you can just create a new layer. So if I just hold down Control Shift N, create a new layer, and I'll set this blend mode to lighten. And now what I can do is start brushing on some colours. So if I pick a red, hit B on my keyboard, I'll just use square brackets to get a brighter brush. And if I just brush, you can see how I can just brush on some cool glows. So you can go around your design and add just little hot spots, see, like that. I might just erase a little bit in here. And then I'll create another layer just so and I'll change this to lighten again, and I'll pick a different colour. Maybe like a blue. Hit B. You can see you can get some really cool. Play around with the opacity of your brush with this slider here. You can just go around and brush on some nice colours. Like that. Just a lot of experimenting, really. Just brush into different spots and see what you're happy with. I might just lower the overall opacity of that. And what you can also do to quickly preview other colours, just hit Control U again and just drag that slider around. You can see that you can straight away add different colours. Cancel that. So that's a really cool thing to add. So just refer to this video if you're stuck creating those. So it can add quite a bit to the design. Now another thing I want to show you is if I hold down Control Shift Alt E, hit that, what it will do, it will merge everything we see on the canvas onto one layer. So you can see I've got my entire design on one layer now. Now what I can do is if I hit S, or if we look in the tool panel here, it's the clone stamp tool. I'll use my square brackets to get a bigger brush. If I hold down Alt now, I can sample an area of this layer, and now I can brush it on into other areas, just like that. I'll sample there, I could like brush on there. So you can add little bits of detail where you want. We can just sample areas from that cloud formation there. Another thing to look out for is when I hit S and I sample an area, you can also change the blend mode of how we apply that. So for example, if I choose add, it's going to be pretty bright, so I'll just sample here, and if I brush there, you can see it adds like this really bright hot spot, which you might like. So you can brush on here, things like that. But if I switch that to overlay now and try again, you can see it's a completely different effect. So you can mess around with merging it all onto one layer and using the clone stamp tool, copy some areas and brush them onto different places around your design. Okay, I'm going to delete that, and there's just one other thing that I like to do with the stars. Just to add a little bit of detail, what I'll do is, again, I'll use a layer like this. I'll just set this to try lighten it first. And I like to just brush out, go into these stars, and you can brush a little bit of colour around these stars here, just like that. So you can hone in on individual stars and brush different colours. Let's see what. Change the opacity of my brush. You can see that little bit of colour coming through. And don't forget to duplicate these stars if you want to create more. So if I just hold down Alt and drag to the top, I just made a copy of that layer. I can move stars, out this way, and I want to get rid of that hard edge there, so I'll just use a mask, and I'll just brush that away, and I've just created more stars there. Oh, we'll use that mask again, get rid of that. So you can really build up that cosmic area with more clouds if you want. The key to the results here is really experimenting a lot with the colours, and playing around with the fine details like increasing cloud density in areas. Use some masks to control exactly how you want elements to appear. Brush on if you just want to have full control over the colour. Just use that layer there, and just constant tweaking and playing around. Jump from that folder back into the adjustments, play around with the overall tints, turn some of these on and off, and you'll eventually get to something that looks really cool. Alright, so that is it. If you have any questions or you're stuck with the action, just email me and I'll help you out. If not, I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun using it. Okay, thanks.